anyone who is expecting a heavy demonstration of salt, this isn't it. It's not a technical session. This is a why we need it session. A lot of travelogue. I've only been using salt actively for just a few months, so I'm learning. My reason for being here is so I can pick up a few things to learn later for this project. The company I've been working for in Africa is called eHealth Africa. Our business is providing computer support and logistical support for healthcare. Our principal office is in Kano, Nigeria. You'll see that in a few minutes. Big focus of our operation has been in polio immunizations. That's where I've been basically doing my work. And we were sliding along and figuring we were doing a good job. A few months ago, the government called our company and said, we have a little problem starting up down south. The guy just flew in with Ebola, and can you make an emergency operations center for Ebola like the ones you've made for polio for us? And the boss said, sure. So he and most of the programmers, senior programming crew flew to Lagos and started building an Ebola emergency operations center. And I stayed back in the north and tried to hold the fort together up there. So what I tell you about Ebola, I'm going to get into that much later, will be mostly secondhand what I heard from the other guys. But let's just say that it worked, okay? Now let's see if this works. All right, this is home. Our host for eHealth Africa was a company called ECNX, and see, there was a pointer here. Right there. Okay. That is ECNX headquarters in Africa. 3-story building, and the office where I work, this one, is actually right here through that window. And I walked around the balcony out the other side of the building in another door, and that's where I lived. So it was not a long commute to work, but ECNX was my landlord for work and for home. And as of the turn of the year, I am part-time with eHealth Africa now, and full-time with ECNX. So now you know what that's going on. This is the group of guys who did the GIS specialists. There are about 20 of them basically building the best maps that have ever been built in Nigeria. Bill Gates actually had them take a new set of satellite scans for us to make the maps with. The idea is what these guys were doing is mapping every house in the 11 northern states of Nigeria, so that when the polio vaccination teams go out, they're carrying smartphones with GPSs on them. Every time they stop, the smartphone takes a point. End of the day, all of those points get sent back into a file server. And next morning, the supervisors look at the map that came in from the GPS compared to where those houses are that these guys have located and said, you missed. And they send the team back out to catch the spots that weren't there. They think that within about 2 years, we'll finally have vaccinated enough people that transmission of polio will stop in Africa. Nigeria is the last place where it's at. It's still out there in the wild in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So that's what we were doing. There's where we were at. The dark spot is Nigeria. Now here's a little map that came from Her Majesty's Foreign Office. The green area is where you can travel if you're kind of brave. The yellow area is where British Foreign Office says you probably shouldn't go there, but if it's really essential, you can. And the red areas, they say, stay out. Now, notice this red right here? That's Kano, that's where I lived. down south, down on the coast, you have problems with pirates. Up here, it's Boko Haram, Islamic militants. And so at the end of the street, both sides from the office, there are policemen with AK-47s, and they're all over town, basically, so that next time Boko Haram raises their head, they try and keep them from ever doing that again. But basically, Kano is still a war zone. Last time the militants tried attacking, they attacked the main mosque in the middle of town, because you see, all Muslims should agree with their extreme ideas, and so if they don't, then they'll attack fellow Muslims as well as anybody else. So they sent 3 bombers into the main mosque during Friday services. And one of them actually set his bomb off and killed several people. The other 2 never made it back out of the building. So they do vigilante justice when they feel it's necessary. They believe they're winning, by the way. Nigeria believes they're winning, the army. So it's getting better. I could tell the difference in the amount of police and military. Just the roadblocks on the streets were fewer and nicer, things like that. They're relaxing. Mostly because since they started attacking mainline Muslims, the population has turned against them. Okay, there is Kano. Official population is about 8 million, but our GIS guys believe that's wrong by about a factor of 2, maybe 3. But from Dala Hill, in the middle of Kano, as far as you can see all the way out to the horizon, is city. It's a city about the size of Seattle with 1 shopping mall. And work there can be a little interesting. We can fix them kind of from bottom-up order. Political instability and corruption we can't do much about. The unreliability of the infrastructure is what really affects us in the computer industry. Our compound there, the ECNX, has twin diesel backup generators, so that when one diesel fails, the other can take over. While I was there, they never had the power for out more than 3 days before the grid power came back on. But typically 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day, the grid power will fail. Lights go off for 10 seconds while the diesel's firing up, and the lights switch back on. And so any computer system had better have UPS. Of course, Nigeria is famous for this. This I actually picked up last night off of my email. You've probably all seen them. By the way, there are actually that many princes in Nigeria. There are 36 states. Every state has a royal family. The Emir of Kano had 81 children, the Emir that just died. So there are a lot of princes out there. The new Emir has only 1 wife, and I think 4 or 5 kids, so it's changing. It even happens inside Nigeria. I took this off of a Nigerian web page. Read it carefully, think about it. Yeah. And there are some other little problems. This is the only picture in here that I didn't take myself. It came off the internet. Kind of a typical Nigerian street. That's a dumpster that maybe someday will be picked up. But the problem is the trash gets blown or kicked, because when the goats climb on the piles, they level them around. That is not just a ditch, that's a sewer. And so when the sewer gets plugged with trash, the sewage starts coming out in the street. It's not very neat. Actually, it doesn't smell as bad as I thought it would, but open sewers in a city of 10 million people, yeah. And by the way, WHO has sampled the sewage and found all 3 strains of polio in the sewage in Kano. So. Now this picture I took is a much more typical day. You can't see very far because of the smoke in the air. And the reason it's smoky is because most of the people cook with wood stoves. We pay our drivers really well. I was talking to my driver one day when we were out. He said his worst problem as a provider for his family was getting enough money to buy wood so his wife could cook. I'm not sure what the company paid him, but when he was working for me, I paid him $24 a day. And that's a well-paid person. And of course, can't go to Africa without the kids. This is not actually a school. These are the kids that just flock around when they saw a car pull in and a couple of white people in it. But this was the town where I bought the fabric that I'm wearing. Got to watch the men with the hand looms weave these. It's pretty neat. The kids they love people. You walk down the street in Salt Lake City, if you say hi to someone, they look at you like, well, you're really weird. You know, people, you don't look at people. And Kano is like, it's a village with 10 million people in it. People say hello, people look at you. Very, very friendly, very nice. And the little kids are just wonderful. They work though, you notice, right? Get the right button. That is the mattock that they use to, instead of a plow, to dig up the ground when they're farming. So there's a guy, probably 6 years old, that's been out in the field working, helping his parents. And public education is almost worthless. Anybody who wants a kid to learn anything sends them to private school. This was on the way back from Minjabar, where we got the fabric. We had to wait for the lorry to come past before we could pass the ox cart. And a very lucky, good farmer will have a pair of oxen that he can plow with and take his things to town. Mentioned the electricity failing. This is a little sweetie I met in church. And speakers had to talk loud that day because not only was the grid power out, the Honda generator wouldn't work. So no electricity for church. There's the lake in Minjabar with 2 fishermen cleaning their nets. There were some little girls standing here waiting to buy fish for the minute they got out. But look right here. Whole shore of the lake is trash. This is probably the oldest business in Kano. That is the dye pits. And if you see the pretty tie-dye pattern, that's where they dyed my shirt. Been in business around 500 years as well as they can tell. Very traditional pattern. There's the pit. Those are like 20 feet deep. And they mix the indigo with ash and potash and let it cook for a month before it's ready. And the little guy down here is one of the dye workers. He's got a rubber glove on one hand. So he dips the fabric, pulls it out, dips it, pulls it out all day long. That's the result you get on a big cloth. It's beautiful, beautiful work. They have a terrible time selling this because, A, if they try selling them overseas, nobody believes that it's real because they're from Nigeria. So it's obviously a scam. And then shipping is tremendously expensive. So one of the things I would really love to do for the people there is find some way for these guys to market their product, because people in America would love this handmade stuff. And we just have to find a way to sell it and ship it to them. That's my wife, by the way. She came to visit last summer. So infrastructure, bad roads, bad electricity, water that doesn't always work, affects everything. I've met 4 or 5 expatriates who closed their factories in Nigeria down because they could not afford the diesel fuel and the problems to keep a factory open, throwing thousands of people out of work just because there wasn't enough infrastructure. So what do we need? Well, first of all, we need some education, and education needs infrastructure. And the other thing that I can do to help, they are beginning to use computers a lot, but they need computers that work well, that don't take a lot of training, that'll stand up to some really nasty conditions, and that are easy to use. Now this is the mast on top of Electronic House, 35-meter mast. And these dishes are internet feeds going out across Kano. ECNX is the premier internet service provider in Kano. So that's how they get the internet out. It's almost impossible to drill. I was sure I had that shut off, I'm sorry. Okay, goodbye to the phone. It's very difficult to put fiber in. The city's been there so long, and you've got, open sewers and established roads and things. So plowing fiber is very difficult. Yes. Dedicated point-to-point, 5 megahertz. Customer also has a mast, so it's point-to-point. The devices are called air fiber, which is an oxymoron, but they're a very high-speed dedicated link, and the way you align those antennas is you get an engineer on this mast, an engineer on the customer's mast, talking to each other with walkie-talkies to get those antennas aligned correctly. Really frightening to watch because no safety belt, no shoes. They go up that mast. So please don't slip. Yeah. Watching welding, you'll see the guy will hold a piece of glass up here with one hand and hold his welding stinger with the other and stand there barefoot running an arc welder. So yeah, but they do what they need to do to work, and everybody works. Everybody has at least one job. There's not a big government welfare system, so if you want to eat, you work, and they're very, very they work hard as a people. Well, an American, you walk up to him and he says, "How are you? How you doing?" Nigerian, you walk up to him, he says, "How's work?" Okay, this is one of our computer programs, a little thing called Form Hub that is used for collecting data for the healthcare workers. Clinton Health Initiative was doing this when we had a UNICEF survey on it. They use, again, smartphones or tablets to take a survey, and then when they get back in network range, file server picks it up and stores it, and later the scientists can upload from the file server and do their analysis. This is a Django system, and the reason I wrote this is first of all, so I could figure it out for myself, and then so I could teach other people what it's like. But there's basically the data flow through all these parts of Django and how it works. You see there's Nginx, and there's UWSGI, and here's Postgres over here, and away we go. That was actually the first server that I set up using Salt. So. Okay, Ebola war story. Where are we going for time? Oh, we're good. Lots. This project was going really well. We did also another one for UNICEF, no, CDC, for survey of acute malnutrition. Basically, the hospitals and clinics would use a cell phone message, text message, to report their cases of acute malnutrition, how many they got in that week, how many they were releasing, how their supplies were, and then UNICEF would send them more supplies for next week. So we built a computer system to handle those text messages and track all that. And just as we were finishing them up was when the Ebola call came in. What they did for the Ebola was take the cell phone program that they had used for tracking the vaccinators and adapted it a little bit so it could track people who may have been in contact with Ebola. Might be infected, we don't know. So you stand around and wait for them to start showing symptoms. In America, you've seen the news where they would actually basically put people under arrest. Oh, you might have been infected, you can't leave your house. That doesn't work. So what they did was gave each person a cell phone. We have them by the crate because we use them in hundreds at a time for the polio vaccination campaigns. So handed each person a cell phone. You must keep the cell phone on, you must keep it charged. Twice a day, a healthcare worker would track down that cell phone, GPS, meet the possible victim, and check them for symptoms. If they were starting to run a fever, starting to get headaches, any of those things, in the hospital right now, get them fluid support. We had 20 people in Nigeria contract Ebola. 12 lived, which is pretty amazing. And beat it. Ebola is now gone from Nigeria. Our company is now in the 3 serious countries, set up emergency operation centers and handing out cell phones. We're hoping it's going to work. The FormHub server that you saw the thing from before was one of the 3 servers that are used in that effort. Another one is a GIS mapping server. That one's also set up using Salt. Third one is the one that actually interacts with the cell phones, and it's Node JavaScript. And they always set that thing up manually, and that's the one they're having fun replicating now as they get to other countries. Anyway, the use of Salt unfortunately faded about at this point because with the sudden forced growth of the company, they picked up a professional support organization. They've needed to do that for a long time, is to get a real genuine support staff. So they hired a group in Berlin to be their support organization, which is good because most of the servers are actually in Ireland. They use AWS servers for most of the servers. We do have some in Nigeria, but not many. Support groups said, what's this Salt thing? We've never heard of it. We're going to use Chef and Fabric, and I think there were 5 products that they used all together to do what we're doing with Salt. So, oh well. But that's Ebola. Now, why I think they're not using Salt. I tried several times to get a in-house class on Salt going. And the few people I did informal introductions to, I was like, oh, this is pretty hard to learn. I don't understand what it's doing. It's hard to learn. And so I didn't get a whole lot of conversion that way. And was the day after the Ebola call was the day I was supposed to give my training class. So anyway, then the other group took over, and so Salt usage at eHealth Africa has basically ground to a halt. And that was part of my reason for making the decision to go to work for ECNX, because there I'm the lead software developer and I can tell them to use it. Some of the things I think would have helped very much. First of all, better documentation. SALT documentation is great if you already understand SALT. It's like those of us who remember the early days of Unix. Very hard to break into because there's all of the documentation assumes you already know it. Most of the usage of SALT, and I've seen that here in in this meeting, big shops, people with thousands of servers that they're automating. At ECNX, we'll probably top out at 50 servers at the most, and 40 of them will look like this. So there's not going to be a full-time SALT group. There'll be maybe 2, maybe 3 of us will know how to actually use it. I was downstairs listening to the HTTP interface session. We'll probably be doing something with that so that the guys who don't want to learn SALT can actually use it. SALT has the capability to do a good job for deploying test systems, even on your own workstation. But it's hard to get to do it, hard to teach people how to do it. I'd like to see even just the commands made easier, so that you can hand somebody, you know, the one-page README file on the beginning of your repo and say, here, how you do it, and have them go and learn how nice the tool really is. The one thing that's given me the most trouble with that is that if you put your state files for installation in the same repo as your code, you have to download the repo to get the state files to download the repo. And if you keep it in a separate repo, people don't think, well, I don't want to load that one just so I can load this one. So I haven't figured out a good answer to that. I would like to see some work done on that. And that's, to me, as a small shop user, I believe in SALT, but it's hard for me to sell. Okay, that's that part of the presentation. Now, here's where the ECNX connection came in. Their owner came to me one day and says, I have a problem. You saw the towers, and all over the city there are towers for people to get their internet. I think ECNX probably has 30, maybe, towers around the city. And each of those towers has one or more air fiber point-to-point links on it. And once in a while, one of those links will go down. What's the first thing you do when a link goes down? What's the first thing you do? You guys are all programmers. Well, yeah, but this is, you know, the customer's called you up and he's mad because his internet's down. So the first thing you do is, you can't get there. Okay, so you unplug it, count 5 alligators, plug it back in. Let it reboot, it'll probably be fixed. Right? Except that it's 30 meters up in the air on the other side of town. So you send a technician out to reset the box. Worst luck of all, it'll probably be Friday afternoon. He gets halfway there, it's time for mosque. The entire city becomes a parking lot because there isn't parking at mosques. So if your car isn't close enough you can find a place to park, you just park in the middle of the road. Everybody stops their car, everybody goes to pray. 20 minutes later, everybody comes back out, gets in their car, and traffic starts to move again. But for that time, the city is completely gridlocked because everybody stopped to pray. you can't get across the city sometimes. Other times there will be, 2 or 3 times while I was there have been military lockdowns. The Army says, we think somebody's up to something, stop moving around the city, and traffic stops. You know what that is? It's a Raspberry Pi. $35 computer. Actually, there's about, I don't know, 80 in this one with all the stuff I got hooked to it now. My new boss. When I first got the letter inviting me to Nigeria, because in order to get a visa, you have to have a letter inviting you to Nigeria that you show the consulate. And when I looked down, and the letter was signed by Jihad Jafar, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go or not. Jihad grew up in London. He's a cool guy. He's Lebanese. But just the name is frightening. Jihad came to me one day, told me about the problem, and he says, can we put a Raspberry Pi or something on that mast and hook a relay on it or something so we can turn those blasted things off and reset them? I said, yeah, I think so. And so that has been our basement project for the last several months, is figuring out how we're going to use the Raspberry Pis, put one on each mast to reset these units. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. We'll talk later. That would be great. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Anyway, here will be the first test to see if this thing will actually work. I am logged into my Salt server, which, as you might guess from the name, is in London. And we will see cmd.run, right? If it works. Ah. Yes. So we hook the relays up to those GPIO pins, and theoretically we can be there. We can now control our air fibers remotely through Salt, through Raspberry Pi. That was the first test, first time I've ever expected the loop to work. So you're all witnesses. Okay, anybody any more questions? Or thanks for coming, it was fun.